We are having Kelechi Egwim, who is a scientist, activist, and volunteer in community activities and organizations based in Washington, D.C. Mr. Egwim, thank you so much for joining us here on TRT World. So we have two shootings here. The first one, well, police are still investigating, but apparently it happened right after an anti-immigrant manifesto appeared online speaking of an Hispanic invasion of Texas. The second one in Ohio, police, of course, are still investigating, but 6 of the 9 people there that were shot and killed were of African descent, African Americans. What is your take on what's been happening?
Well, this is an unwillingness to act by American politicians. There have now been more people killed by white supremacist domestic terrorism in the U.S. than all the people that were killed during 9/11. Since 2001, we've had more people killed by domestic white supremacists since then. Immediately after 9/11, the U.S. went on this extreme effort to infiltrate and to control any threat from a Muslim or Islamic or leaning terrorists or groups, whether they were even just religious groups, mosques and what have you. But this threat of white nationalist terrorism has really been around since the beginning of this country. But with guns and with the politicians being completely bought by the gun manufacturers lobby, the NRA, what you're seeing now is that there should have been a long time ago, and we keep calling for it, an effort to infiltrate these groups. There was an office in the FBI, which was a task force to look at and to deal with and to study white supremacist groups, which are the largest hate groups in America. And the Trump administration just closed that office earlier this year. The shooter in El Paso, in his manifesto, talked about Mexicans and immigrants as an invasion, which is the exact same language that Donald Trump used in May of this year as he was talking. He said, this is an invasion, it's an invasion. And when people take that rhetoric, they turn it into action. But I'm not blaming Donald Trump only for this. The Democrats are equally culpable. They're equally unwilling to act. When Obama was elected, for 2 years, the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate. Filibuster group of proof majorities. They could have done anything they wanted to, and yet they did not renew the assault weapons ban, which had expired during the Bush administration. So what you see is that there is an unwillingness to really solve the problem and confront the corporations that are making money, blood money, off of these violent acts, which continue to act. You're not seeing background checks on people who have mental illnesses, who have known to be involved with domestic partner violence, people who have been known to be violent in their communities. You're not preventing them from buying guns. You're not even really abolishing guns. They should not be in the hands of civilians in a civilized society. Those guns are plentiful and available. Anybody can get them. And there's an unwillingness to act on both sides of the two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans in America.
Well, while it's still being debated whether or not Trump can be considered racist, Democratic Senator Tim Ryan says white nationalists think Trump is nationalist. How much of an impact do you think President Trump has on attacks like these?
Oh, he's a motivator. I mean, he's a Pied Piper. He blows his flute, and the snakes follow him. He's somebody who influences people who are already unstable. One thing that people like Trump have been able to do, because I don't think he really even believes any of those things he says, but I know he believes that he can use that language and that rhetoric to motivate people to support him. When you teach people that their hardships, their economic hardships, their community hardships are somebody else's fault. And you can point to that person and tell them, this is the person that you should really be worried about. They stop focusing on the real problem, who are the politicians who actually failed to meet their needs, and they turn the attention on that entity, whether it's immigrants, whether it's black people, whether it's Muslims, whether it's Jews, whoever it is that is being pointed to as the cause of the problem, you shift away. So somebody like Trump knows how to manipulate the people, and unfortunately, too many white Americans are too eager to believe that everybody else who's not white is their problem, and he knows that. So when he speaks to that, they listen, they come out, they act, and he I think counts on getting even more of them activated and energized in a very negative way in order to ensure that he is reelected in 2020.
It's absolutely fascinating as well, Mr. Egwim, that this manifesto talks about this Hispanic invasion of Texas and the fact that they want to get rid of people that they don't think is American. What does an organization like yours, Appeal Inc., do to counter such rhetoric?
Well, we're not focused on countering the rhetoric per se. We're focused on building coalitions. We're focused on educating people about the history of racism and white supremacy in this country. We're focused on building opportunities for people to better themselves, because the result of this same system that energizes a shooter like this is that you actually have a whole economic system, educational system, housing system that's based on this same violence. They're not using guns, they're using signatures. When they redline a community and say that we're not going to give loans to people who live in this part of the country, or that we're going to charge them a higher interest rate, it disadvantages anybody who lives there. In America, what you find is that, white families that make over $100,000 a year generally live around black families, I should say black families that make over $100,000 a year. The neighborhoods they live in are the same neighborhoods that white families that make about $40,000 live. So you have a system that disadvantages people because of the loans they're able to get, the type of educational access they're able to get. So it's a systemic violence, that goes on. So what we try to do is educate people, build alternatives, build independent institutions, and really create a network of the disenfranchised, because the reality is that this country is still controlled by the 1%. And the only way they control the rest of the country is to convince the 99% that everybody else is the enemy. So our job is to really build those coalitions as soon as the 99% realize that they are the ones who are in control of things, and they're giving up their control by continuing to empower, elect, in some cases spend their money with the 1%, and empower them to continue to control them. As soon as they learn that they're the ones actually in control, then they wield the power differently. So our job is to really build those coalitions, educate people, empower them, and in order to change the tide. White supremacists you're not going to change their minds. This is a philosophy that they believe that they will lose their country. Some believe they've already lost their country. So it's a life or death situation for them, and that's not going to change in their mind.
Mr. Egwim, thank you so much for joining us here on TRT. We wish you the best of luck in the work that you guys do at Appeal Inc. Thanks.